boxes. And here we'll cover everything that is going to help optimize and improve your performance. And I am here with the awesome nutritionist Finn. Finn, say hello. And yeah, how did you get into nutrition and working in the kind of combat sports scene?
How you doing, Kieran? Yeah, first of all, just want to say thank you very much for having me on. Yeah, so to be honest with you, it all started from when I was in uni and I was studying for my degree in sports nutrition and, doing various assignments with athletes and doing various case studies with combat sports athletes. So I kind of got the passion for it from there, and then learning about different ways to cut weight, different methods of managing your weight, fueling your performance, and kind of just, developed the passion for it over the years. And then eventually decided one day, from actually one of my mates at the time, just randomly turned around to me and said, you know what you should do? You've got all this knowledge about nutrition, you know a lot about diet. You should start posting videos on Instagram. And at first, it terrified me, the thought of getting on camera. But after a bit, I just thought, you know what? Might as well get stuck into it. So I started off actually talking about nutrition in general. There wasn't really any specific niche or any sort of targeted audience. But after a while, I started realizing that I was just giving information to like general population. So then I started realizing that I need to dial down with a niche, and then realized that I've always loved boxing, MMA, combat sports, and there's obviously a lot of issues in weight cutting which I'd like to solve, and I know I've got the potential to solve it and make things easy for a lot of fighters. So I just kind of got into that, working with the fighters and kind of like researching about different struggles fighters have when it comes to making weight. And then I just started directing all of my content towards that, giving, free value tips, TikTok, Instagram, YouTube shorts, pretty much every social media platform you can think of, really. And then just started working with fighters and basically just working on building my reputation, just spreading my message as much as I can, really, and just developing it. And that's it, really, in a nutshell. Yeah.
Nice. So tell me about the first ever fighter that you worked with then. Like, how did it come around, or how did it come about, sorry? And yeah, was that a weight cut as well, or was that more like performance driven nutrition? So like, even though I guess they do go hand in hand, I totally understand that. But yeah, the kind of end goal, was it predominantly weight cut, or was it a bit more kind of like performance focused?
Yes, so I mean, I've had that many fighters, it's hard to remember who was actually my first original one, but to be honest, let me try and think. So the first fighter that I was working with was a guy called Darren McManus, and we're still working together to this day. And we've actually done a podcast together earlier on. But yeah, so he was the first, I'd say, active fighter that I started working with around, I think it was around May time. And I just got back from Australia, and he basically messages me and he says, "Hiya mate, you okay?" I said, "I've seen your videos. I like a lot of your information. I know you're a nutritionist and you're good at working with fighters." He says, "Look, I need to lose 9 kilograms in 2 weeks." And as soon as I heard that message and I seen that, I thought, oh my God, this guy actually wants me to help him do it, and I'm actually going to be working with him. And to be honest, I was quite nervous about doing it at the time, even though I was qualified and I knew what I was doing. It was the first time I
that message from him though, I need to lose 9 kilos in 2 weeks. Sorry, that is one of those like, tell me you're a boxer without telling me you're a boxer, and you just show someone that message and they're like, yeah, he's definitely a boxer. Literally not doing any weight cutting until the last minute. Shock. But sorry to cut you off.
No, it's all right. So then what happened is basically onboarded him, had a little conversation with him over the phone, and just got all the diet set up for him. And he managed to take off, I think it was around 2 or 3 kilograms on the first week. And we did that through manipulations to his diet and getting him to sweat more, like getting in the sauna, doing more runs, and basically just doing these active and passive sweating methods. And then the week before the fight, I put together the water load for him and all the weight cutting meals on the week of the fight and all the rehydration and refueling. And he managed to make the weight very easily. And I remember I put the post on social media, and as soon as I got that post up, just got messages left, right, centre. Like I said, I blew up, and everybody just started wanting to work with me then. And that was probably the first moment that I got a big result. And obviously the first fighter I actively helped with a weight cut and make weight and fuel his fight. And, I'll obviously remember that for a very long time. And obviously I thank Dara for giving me the opportunity to work with him, because it's very difficult. I know what it's like for fighters at the start because I think one of the issues that a lot of fighters have got is as well, what I've noticed, what I've heard from coaches, and what I've experienced myself, is that because a lot of fighters are very sceptical, and you'll know this as well, about who they bring onto the team. And if they see somebody who's not got much experience, there's not really much trust there. So Dara took me on board, and then we actually got the result that he wanted got him to where he wanted to be. And then I started building up, like, that's kind of like the snowball effect and getting more results with fighters.
Yeah.
And then I started to sort of build this trust, and then that's how I started to work with more fighters. Because I think it's what it's about, really, isn't it? It's about getting trusting people and just having that sort of proof to show that you can do what you can do. Because even though I had all the knowledge and I'd done case studies with fighters in uni and stuff like that, and I knew what I was talking about, that's a totally different to actually working with somebody. Because I believe you can have all the knowledge in the world, but if you don't apply it and you don't get experience, don't really count for much, to be honest. And I think that's the same with in any walk of life.
Yeah, definitely. And as you're saying there about people not bringing on people with a lot of experience, it's one of those really frustrating aspects that is prevalent in all walks of life, is that this like, oh, you need to have experience, but it's like, if you're not given an option to get experience, how am I going to get experience? And it goes to just like all jobs, all careers, everything. And it's quite frustrating on that front. But I mean, that's an incredible feat, doing that 9 kilos in 2 weeks and doing it easy, like you say, because that sort of thing, if done wrong, can absolutely destroy the performance of a fighter. So I really want to dig into just really specifically nutrition in this show today. So there, you're talking about water loading. Now, is that the main type of cutting that you tend to use? Because again, that's quite tough for a lot of fighters to try and manually do without the kind of, because you might find things on Google, you might find anything like typing in how-tos on the internet. But I think if you're going to try and cut weight without a good professional, like an educated professional, an experienced professional like yourself, like I found water loading very, very dangerous because you can really fuck your weight up, can't you?
Yeah, I think, and here's my take on it, and here's what I've kind of learned from it actually throughout the past few months. But water loading is just one of the tools that we'd use to help you sort of lower the scale weight as much as you possibly can. And essentially what water loading does is, usually you'll do it a week before the fight, and usually it's most beneficial for fighters who have got a day before weighing, because obviously if you're cutting more weight and using a water load, you've got to factor in that time between the weighing and the actual fight to get all that fluid back into you. But here's the thing with the water loading. What it does is it forces your body and tricks hormones in your body. So you've got two main hormones. You've got aldosterone, and then you've got one called ADH. One of them hormones is responsible for retaining more sodium in your body, and one of them is important for regulating your urine output. So what you're actually doing with the water loading is you're tricking your body. So you drink a lot more water at the start, and then you bring the water intake down. And what happens is at first, you're peeing constantly, and you'll be sweating like a madman basically at the start. And that's a sign that it's right. And then what happens is it's kind of a delayed response. So the weight kind of comes off slowly. And then when you get to, let's say, for example, your weigh-in's on the Friday, what would usually happen is Monday, Tuesday, the weight will come down very slowly. It might plateau, but then when you get to like Wednesday afternoon, Thursday, it starts to come down quite rapidly. But one thing that I've noticed with water loading is that obviously it's very common in combat sports. A lot of fighters will use it. And the thing is with it, it's sometimes a good tool and sometimes not, because what I've noticed with, working with different fighters is some fighters actually benefit off water loading more than others, because there's been times, now listen, I've got different water loading methods for different scenarios based on how much weight you've got to cut. And sometimes some fighters actually respond well to the water loading and the weight comes off at the rate that we'd want it to come off. And then some fighters actually don't respond to it at all and the weight stalls. And there's been time periods where the water load hasn't responded and it's not worked. And I panicked and thought, why is this not working? It's worked with so many other fighters. But in these scenarios, in these instances, it's not working. So sometimes you've got to change the approach in order to make sure that the weight comes down. And what I've noticed is, alongside the water loading, making little changes gradually and actually preparing them strategically is how the weight comes down, and being specific towards that fight in terms of how much weight they've got to cut, even how much muscle mass they've got, because the more muscle mass you've got on your body, the more water you hold, and the more water you hold, the more you can get rid of. So it's pretty self-explanatory like that. So it's all dependent on basically them kind of principles that I've just mentioned. And what I like to do actually, and something that I'm starting to do with a lot of fighters I'm working with at this moment in time and going forward into the future, is actually trialing different water loads earlier on in the camp. Now, the reason why I'm trying to do that is to give them an idea, obviously give me an idea and give them that confidence to see, like, is this approach working or is that approach working? Then when it gets close to fight and it's actually time to do the water load and use these weight cutting methods, then there's that sort of trust and know-how to be like, right, well, we've done this one before